Erwin Rommel did not rise to fame from behind a desk or through political speeches. His reputation was forged where dust-covered uniforms, engines overheated, and decisions meant the difference between survival and destruction. From the very beginning of the war, he showed a style of command that was both aggressive and personal. He did not wait for reports to arrive. He went forward to see the battlefield himself. When German forces moved through France in 1940, Rommel commanded a fast-moving division that advanced with a speed that surprised even his own superiors. He drove his troops hard, pushing them through broken roads and collapsing enemy lines, often ignoring orders to slow down. To Rommel, hesitation was more dangerous than risk. He believed that momentum was a weapon, and he used it relentlessly. His soldiers came to see him not as a distant officer, but as a commander who shared their dangers. He appeared at the front lines, exposed to fire, studying enemy positions with his own eyes. This behavior created loyalty, but it also built a legend. Stories spread quickly that Rommel seemed to appear where fighting was fiercest, guiding tanks through smoke and confusion, as if he could see the future of the battle before it happened. His true legend, however, would be born far from Europe, in the burning sands of North Afrika. When Italy's campaign against the British began to collapse, Germany sent Rommel to stabilize the situation. What he found was chaos. Italian units were retreating, supply lines were weak, and British forces believed victory was close. Rommel did not accept defense as his role. Almost immediately, he launched counterattacks with the limited forces available to him. His tactics relied on speed, deception, and sudden concentration of power. He struck where the enemy did not expect him, often attacking with fewer tanks but greater coordination. British commanders were confused by the way German forces appeared to come from nowhere, hit hard, and vanish again into the desert. Rommel understood that the desert itself could be a weapon. There were no forests to hide in, no cities to defend. Everything depended on movement, fuel, and timing. He turned wide-open space into a maze of threats, using dust clouds and long flanking movements to disguise his intentions. As victories accumulated, Rommel became known as the Desert Fox. The name reflected his ability to outthink opponents rather than simply overpower them. He studied enemy habits and adapted quickly. When British forces relied on strong defensive positions, he bypassed them. When they depended on armored superiority, he split their formations and destroyed them piecemeal. He paid close attention to logistics, understanding that fuel and ammunition were as decisive as guns. Yet this was also his greatest vulnerability. Every success pushed him farther from his supply bases. Convoys crossing the Mediterranean were attacked by Allied aircraft and submarines. Tanks sat idle for lack of fuel. Soldiers rationed water under an unforgiving sun. Rommel constantly balanced between boldness and collapse. He advanced, knowing that one failure in supply could trap his entire army in the desert. Rommel's relationship with Adolf Hitler was complex. Hitler admired him and used his victories for propaganda, presenting him as the perfect example of German military genius. Rommel, however, was not a politician. He focused on battlefield reality rather than ideological goals. When he asked for more resources, he often received promises instead of supplies. Berlin expected miracles from him while giving him just enough to survive. This tension grew as the war expanded. In North Africa, Rommel faced increasing numbers of Allied troops supported by superior air power and naval control. His forces became more isolated. The battlefield began to change. What had once been a contest of maneuver turned into a struggle of attrition. Rommel could still win battles, but he could no longer replace losses. The Allies, by contrast, brought fresh troops and new equipment continuously. Despite this, Rommel continued to lead from the front. He moved between units under fire, encouraging soldiers and reorganizing defenses personally. His health deteriorated under the strain. He suffered from illness, exhaustion, and injuries caused by long exposure to combat conditions. Yet he refused to withdraw from command. He believed that leadership required presence. When Allied forces launched major offensives, Rommel tried to meet them with flexible defenses, counterattacks, and rapid redeployment of what little armor he had left. Over time, however, the imbalance became overwhelming. Air superiority allowed the Allies to destroy German transport, and isolate units. Eventually, North Africa was lost. Rommel was recalled before the final surrender, spared the humiliation, but aware that his campaign had reached its limit. His next assignment placed him in an even more dangerous political and military position. Rommel was sent to defend Western Europe against an Allied invasion that everyone knew was coming. He inspected beaches, bunkers, and obstacles, concluding that the invasion must be stopped at the shoreline. He disagreed with other generals who believed in holding armored reserves inland. Rommel had learned from air power in Africa. He knew that any movement of tanks in daylight would be destroyed by aircraft. To him, the beaches were the battlefield where the war in the West would be decided. He ordered massive fortifications, mines, and obstacles placed along the coast. Time, however, was against him. Materials were limited. The coastline was vast. Political arguments slowed action. Rommel worked with urgency, convinced that delay meant defeat. When the Allied landings came in June 1944, Rommel was not present at the front. He had gone to Germany to visit his wife and to argue for more authority over defenses. This absence would later be seen as symbolic. The invasion overwhelmed German coastal defenses despite fierce resistance in some sectors. Rommel returned to find the front already unstable. Allied forces poured into Normandy with massive support from air and sea. German counterattacks were fragmented and destroyed from above. Rommel attempted to organize resistance, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. His warnings proved correct. Tanks moving by day were annihilated. Supply lines were cut. Villages became battlegrounds. The war he had tried to stop at the beach now spread across France. During this period, Rommel's views changed. He began to believe that Germany could not win the war. He saw the destruction of cities, the loss of armies, and the overwhelming industrial power of the Allies. Unlike many within the regime, he was not blinded by ideology. He thought in military terms and understood that continued fighting would only bring ruin. This placed him in moral conflict. Rommel was loyal to Germany, but he no longer believed in Hitler's leadership. He spoke privately about the need to end the war. These conversations, though cautious, would later place him under suspicion. In July 1944, Rommel was seriously wounded when his car was attacked by Allied aircraft. He survived but was removed from command during a critical moment of the war. Shortly afterward, a conspiracy within the German officer corps attempted to assassinate Hitler. Although Rommel was not directly involved, some conspirators saw him as a possible leader for a Germany without Hitler. His name appeared in interrogations. For the regime, this was enough. Rommel was given a choice: face trial, which would lead to execution and punishment of his family, or take his own life and be honored as a hero. He chose death. The state announced that he had died of wounds. A funeral was held. The truth remained hidden until after the war. Rommel's story is unique because it reflects both the brilliance and the tragedy of military leadership in a criminal regime. On the battlefield, he was a commander of extraordinary talent. He understood movement, surprise, and morale better than most of his contemporaries. His soldiers respected him. Even his enemies admired his skill. Yet his success served a system that led Europe into catastrophe. Unlike many Nazi leaders, Rommel was not driven by ideology. He was driven by duty and by a belief in soldierly honor. This made him popular, but it also made him dangerous to a regime built on absolute loyalty rather than professional judgment. What makes Rommel stand out among commanders of the Second World War is not simply the battles he won, but the way he fought them. He did not hide behind distance. He did not rely solely on numbers. He relied on understanding the battlefield as a living system, where fear, speed, and decision were as important as firepower. His campaigns show the power of leadership when combined with tactical intelligence. They also show the limits of brilliance when strategy and politics work against it. Rommel could win battles, but he could not change the structure of the war. He could not overcome the industrial might of the Allies or the strategic mistakes of Hitler. In the end, his talent prolonged fighting, but could not alter the outcome. Rommel's legacy remains controversial. To some, he represents the ideal of the professional soldier, detached from ideology and focused on duty. To others, he cannot be separated from the regime he served. Both views contain truth. He was a brilliant battlefield commander who fought for a criminal state. He tried to act honorably within a system that was fundamentally dishonorable. This contradiction defines his life and death. His name survives not because of political speeches or grand strategy, but because of the way he commanded men in combat. He walked among his soldiers, faced danger personally, and made decisions under fire. That is why he is remembered not as a bureaucrat of war, but as a figure of action. In the story of World War II, Erwin Rommel stands as a symbol of battlefield excellence caught inside a losing cause. His rise shows how individual talent can shape battles. His fall shows how no individual can escape the consequences of the system they serve. He did not create the war, but he became one of its most famous faces. His victories were real, his defeats were inevitable, and his end reflects the final collapse of a Germany that had placed its faith in force rather than reason. Rommel's story is not simply about tanks in the desert or defenses on the coast. It is about the limits of military genius when confronted with political fanaticism and industrial war. That is why his life remains one of the most powerful and tragic narratives of the Second World War.